So I thought what I'd do is look at some of the things you should be doing that are things you have to comply with in order to keep getting your funding from the government, things like that. Some things that it's sensible to do, and then some other things you can think about. So it's where to focus your efforts, really. So I won't bother with the introduction because nobody's coming and nobody's left. So we've got things like this out there. This is a framework of everything you should be looking at in your IT. This is mostly for industry, but really in education you've got to cover all of that. It's quite a scary thing to look at, so I don't show it to people very long, and I don't let it be on the screen for very long because I don't like people getting scared by it. But there's a nice abridged version, which was done by Bechta. Anybody who's old enough to remember Bechta, who were around for years, it was called FITS. We've got a new service coming out called EdTech Central, which is coming out of A&E and a couple of other things we're doing. That's to try and sort of fill in that gap that Bechta left when it went of impartial advice. It's very difficult to get impartial advice. So we've got EdTech Central that's coming on board, and in that we've sort of rebranded the FITS framework as an EdFITS framework around education, but it's basically the same thing. We've just updated it, taken out the reference to floppy disks and that sort of thing because they're not relevant anymore. So these are the main areas that cover, and you've got this bit here. So the first bit that you must do is this external compliance. These are the things you have to do as a school. It's in your agreements with your funding agency, whoever that is. And there's 4 basic ones. The first one is website. We all know we should audit our website, make sure it's compliant, particularly if you've got Ofsted coming. And you can tell if Ofsted are coming if you look at your logs and you see somebody's been going looking at all the policies, because Ofsted are the only people that do that. Nobody else goes through and reads them all. So these are the things that you have to go. There's lots of areas. It's really easy because this is one of the things they do very well. There's 2 lists on the gov.gov website of exactly what you should be doing, one for maintained, one for academies. Okay, there's a couple of other bits that aren't covered by that, so things that Companies House say you have to do, but this is particularly the education bit of it. There are companies that will do that audit for you. We're one of those companies, but there's plenty of people out there. But if you've got an hour, you can do it yourself very easily. I shouldn't say that because that's giving money away, but it's not a complicated thing to do, and you know your schools very well. Then we've got the DfE standards. These start to come out. Is everybody aware of the DfE standards? Is anybody that isn't and doesn't know what I'm talking about? Good. I'm hoping that's just people do. And so DfE standards is a whole new list of this is what you should be looking at. We're not sure yet how enforced they're going to be. Are they going to really say to schools you must do this? And they don't know yet either, if we're honest. I'm helping with some of the drafts of some of these, and they're asking the question when they're looking for feedback, should this say must, should this say should, what should it look like? And there's a few more coming along, like end user devices, leadership and governance, accessibility, there's a few more. But these are the ones that are out there at the moment. And really you look at these when you're looking to spend money, they're a good guide of where your money should be going, and it should be fitting all those things. The exception to that is probably the cybersecurity, which doesn't go that far, but it's quite good. And then you've got the filtering and monitoring. You should absolutely be making sure right away that you're fulfilling those standards. So have a look at. They're all on the .gov website. They're all on the A&E website with a nice little rag rating tool if you're a member of A&E as well. So they're really important. They're going to get more important. We don't quite know how significant yet, but they're clearly not spending their time doing it just for the fun of it. Okay. There are some health and safety. This is quite often overlooked. So there's some health and safety. If you've got people using a computer, you have to make sure you're fulfilling your health and safety guidance and doing that. There's a really good, on the HSE website, if we're sending this presentation out, these are all hyperlinks to what you need. But there's a really good checklist. In theory, you should do it for every person, every desk, but you'll know that already. Interestingly, they have now released some home working guidance, which never used to be relevant to schools, but is getting more and more relevant. So obviously the onus is on the individual, but you have to make sure they're aware of that and that they're following that. So there's extra guidance there to look at as well. And then finally there's GDPR. I could do a whole hour on what you need to do on GDPR. In fact, I could probably do a whole day on it. So I'm not going to go into detail, but knowing things like where your data's stored, who's holding it, why you're holding it, and again, looking forward, if all this data got leaked, what can you do about it? Well, make sure that you're only holding the data you should be, because if suddenly all your data's put on the dark web and people go, well, why have you got that information? That kid left 12 years ago. Why have you still got their medical details on your system? You shouldn't have, for example. And then list the people and understanding why and how you're processing data. How are we doing for time? We're okay. So those are the external compliance stuff. That's stuff you absolutely have to do. So start there, because you can get into trouble if you don't do that to various degrees. You'll notice there's nowhere on here that talks about cybersecurity. There's nowhere in the framework that talks about cybersecurity, because it shouldn't be a thing in its own right. It's actually in all these other things. If you've got your change management right and your financial management right and your incident management and you're following GDPR and you're following the DfE standards, you're naturally taking care of your cybersecurity on its own. But this is where, as I was talking about earlier, Cyber Essentials can be really important. If you follow that and use that as an auditing tool, it's really powerful. There's two versions of it, for those of you who don't know what it is. The Cyber Essentials, which is completely self-assessment. You do that yourself. You go through the checklist and you determine whether you're compliant. Cyber Essentials Plus is basically someone comes along to double check it. The second one's more expensive than the first one. The first one is still fairly expensive depending on how you go about doing it. So it's government backed and it's government recognised. It comes with things like insurance as well. If you go through the process, you get a bit of extra free insurance. It's completely self-assessment if you go for the standard Cyber Essentials. And all those things I talked about in that first presentation pretty much are covered by it. So you can go through the whole process. There's 5 key technical controls. So it does talk about some slightly more techie stuff, although it's not in that technical a language. Firewall, secure configuration. Ask things like, can your firewall be accessed? Can the admin panel for it be accessed outside of the school rather than inside the school? Things like that. Have you changed the default passwords on your routers? These sort of very basic stuff, but it's really useful stuff to do. And it just gives you a checklist. There's some things in there can make it difficult. So for example, every operating system must be up to date and supported. We've all got lathes sitting in a D&T room that are on Windows 98 or Windows XP or something like that that's old now. So that can make it quite difficult. So you can't necessarily tick all the boxes. But even then, if you get a copy of the questions, you don't have to sign up for it. You can just get a copy of the questions. They're available online. And just go and see how close you can get. The more things you can tick off on your own without needing to go for the accreditation, the better. And it's a really powerful, really powerful list. Okay. Right. I think we're about there. I've got a couple more minutes. So I'm just very quickly going to talk about how to assess anything else. There's a few examples there of what you could assess if you want to have a quick look through that list. How your IT is used, what you use, how often users are using it, are you getting value for money out your kit, basically, is what most things are saying there. And there's this scale that I use quite a lot. So if you think about one particular thing, and MIS is a good thing to think about this, or Office 365, are you in crisis management? Crisis management means you're thinking more about how the system is working than actually using it. So you've got Office 365 set up. Are the emails going everywhere? Are people able to log in? Are you sending an email with confidence that you know it's getting to where it's got to be getting to? If not, then you're in crisis management because you're thinking more about getting the system working than just using it effortlessly. Then you've got the middle one, which is stable, reliable. So you've bought Office 365, you're using it for email, it's working well, doing everything you wanted to, you're not giving it a second thought. You know if you send an email, you're confident everybody's going to get it and everybody's going to read it. But you're maybe not using some of those other tools, the online meetings for parents' evenings, that sort of stuff. But you're getting what you wanted. You wanted it as an email system, so you've set it up for that and you're getting what you paid for. Same with an MIS. You're taking your registers, you do your compliance stuff, you're getting what you want, that's it. Getting what you paid for. Then you've got the value added. This is where you're saying, well, now let's see what else we can do with it. Let's take it up to having parents' evenings online. Let's look at getting the MIS so we're getting far more data out of it. Let's look at all those things. And that's when you're up at value added. But the key to all those 3 areas, they're all costing you the same money. So the closer to that end you're getting, the smarter you're being, the more you're getting out your kit, the better value for money you get. If you're here, you're paying for a system that don't work, well, you're a mug, aren't you, basically. But if you're up there and you're using it, same money, same licenses, same everything else, you're getting everything you want out of it. So when you look at any system, think about it in those 3 phases. Obviously, there's degrees in between. You're not jumping straight from one to the other. But just have a think of things like that. And you can rag rate them, red, amber, green, if you want to.